Hey, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm with the very wonderfully talented Mr. Dave Way. How are you?
Very good. I'm marvelous.
You're marvelous.
Do I need to do this? Do I need to be like...
I don't know. Does he need to do this, Eric?
I've always wanted one of those match game microphones. No, you didn't have match game. Match game was a TV, game show.
Yeah.
And I actually went looking for this microphone not too long ago, which was this really long, about, God, like 3 feet long, just a tiny little sleeve with a little capsule at the end, and he would hold it down here.
Yeah.
And it was just the weirdest looking thing, but I was like, that's the coolest microphone ever. I need to have that microphone. So if we can find out the model before the price of it goes up.
Oh yeah, we're going to find it.
I've mentioned it on
now you mentioned
show,
it.
and
yeah, everybody's going to go out and buy the mic. Yeah, we were talking about that
Gene
earlier.
Rayburn microphone, it's probably referred to as.
Gene Rayburn?
Rayburn, yeah. He was the host.
All right, well, we'll check it out. Yeah, they're probably going to rock it up in price. We were talking about that with Val Garay, where he was telling us about SM53s and Sony clip-on electret mics. The electret mic was the sound of James Taylor's acoustic, which is one of the most identifiable acoustic guitar sounds.
Right.
They went from like 50
right
bucks.
Up on the strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you put them on, exactly, on the sound hole pointing. I think it was a lot because you got the pick going over the strings.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Which model?
Yeah,
I want to write this down.
I think it's like...
I missed that episode.
One of the most generic kind of like electret clip-on mics that probably for years people would have bought just to use with their Walkmans or whatever, you know, just... They're pretty old, so they may have gone with like the early cassette players and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're here in your studio. I forgot to ask you, what's it called? Do you have a name?
Waystation.
There you go.
Yep.
Why is that? No, I'm just joking. That's fantastic. Hey, you told me you used to have a large format SSL in here.
I did.
I'm being
It used to be right here. It was an SSL 6000E that I had, let's see, I put it in around 2002, I think, 2001, 2002 was around when my daughter was born. So, and I thought, it'd be good to be able to mix at home a little more.
Yeah, definitely.
And I kind of lucked out where the timing of it was, the music business was still booming and going great and everything. And then, like within a couple of years, like I felt like by about 2005, everything had kind of changed. And budgets had come way down, and now I was kind of fortunate that I had a studio that was free if need be. You know what I mean? It didn't have to be billed separately, and it could be kind of lumped in with my fee.
Yep.
So and it worked out. So whereas when I first started, I thought I'd maybe work here, a couple of projects a year or whatever, and then very quickly it was like, nope, everything.
Yeah.
Everything here. Even I had another studio that was a commercial studio, but I was still always working here, even though, it was a proper studio, but yeah.
I mean, these days, probably, we were talking about Jack, who's a mutual friend of ours, Jack Douglas. And I remember, and I may have told this story before, so excuse me. I remember he was recording in one room, I was in another, and we both wanted to use the live room. And so, of course, I came in and said, 2 control rooms and 1 live room. I was like, sure, you can have the live room. And Jack's like, I don't care. But the assistant who was working a session was like, no, we need a proper live room. And Jack's like, just use the office. Because I don't know what they were doing, maybe a guitar overdub. And the assistant obviously was a little upset that, I'm not going to get to use it. Right. And Jack's like, I made like toys in a house.
Was it?
Yeah, and it's just
really?
like...
Did they do that in a house?
I think they may have...
plan or something? Yeah.
Maybe they went and mixed and overdubbed in other places. But ultimately, so many great albums. I mean, a big chunk of After the Gold Rush is up in Woodstock in a barn.
Sure. Yeah.
I know they finished a lot of it at Sunset Sound. But the reality is like, what you've got here is pretty much the same as any commercial studio these days.
Well, it's funny, when I built it, the idea was, I used to work a lot at Larrabee Studios, and so I was like, okay, I need an SSL, and I need some, reverbs and outboard gear, and I had, Pro Tools was fairly common at that. It was pretty much the standard, just kind of become it.
Yep.
And so I had a Pro Tools rig, and it was just like, okay, I need Larrabee here.
Sure.
And now it's it's just kind of changed over the years. It's become more of a production room now. Back then it was 100% mixing. That's all it was mixing every day.
Occasional overdub.
Yeah, occasional, a vocal or something like that. But it was pretty much all mixing, and now it's, not even, I'd say maybe half mixing, and then, the rest of it's production and tracking and overdubs and whatever. Yeah. So
Great.
yeah, and I like it. I feel like there's like everything that we need to do outside of having, I don't have that much space, so like strings, or I've had quartets and maybe six here, but outside of that, I feel like I can do most everything.
Yeah, I mean, these days, especially in the overdub world, the only time you're really going to need any huge room is if you want that big drum sound.
Yeah, well, I find this room is pretty lively for its size, and it's always easier to make it sound bigger with compression and delays and stuff than to try and make something big sound tight. That's always a little tougher to do. So I feel like this is a good kind of medium size that I can get big sounds if I need to and nice tight sounds. So
selfishly, I want to ask you this question. So I have a 40-channel SSL at the moment.
Right.
Which is also actually it's a 4,000 frame with 6,000 E channels.
Oh, okay.
Strangely enough.
Very similar to what I had, a 48 channel here. Yeah.
So I've been contemplating, and sorry I'm being very selfish here, I've been contemplating, so what was the process like to going to this matrix? Mm-hmm. And what's different for you?
Well, I'll tell you, I thought about it long and hard for a couple of years, because I was like, as you know, once you install, an SSL and it's commissioned and sitting here with
which is an expensive process.
Yeah, it's an expensive process, and you've got a separate machine room with air conditioners going 24/7, and so I was like, I don't, slowly but surely I started kind of being forced into going more into the box, just because in order to keep the wheels turning, you had to do more projects at a time, rather than one at a time, which is the way it was for years. It'd be 2 at a time, and then maybe 3 at a time, and so being able to go back and forth between those projects quickly and easily was more important. And so I started stepping in. When I first started, I never used an EQ or compressor plug-in. I just used it as a tape machine, Pro Tools, and it would come up on the console. And then slowly but surely I started to check out, and when I first heard, I remember, I think it was the McDSP EQ, was like, oh, this is actually a good sounding EQ. I could use this, yeah. And, certain compressors and things. I was like, I could start using some of these. And I did, and then I started doing some things more in the box. And then before you know it, like a couple of years later, I was basically using, I'd gone to summing it out into 24 channels, then 16, and then just 2 channels, and then just using the bus compressor. And, before you knew it, I was like, I'm really not using much of this console anymore.
Well,
do I want to hold on to this just because I love it and I've had it, and, it's been kind of a part of me for 15 years, and I've always mixed on SSL since I started. 6000s in particular were my favorite console. And, I thought long and hard about it, and I was afraid, are clients gonna be, let down because they don't walk in and they don't see a big, behemoth of a desk and think, oh yeah, this is the place, And after a while, I remember reading an article with one of my favorite engineers, Chad Blake, who I'm sure you know, and it was an article where he talked about how he had gone totally in the box and was excited about it, and if you know Chad's thing, it's very just cool and vibey and analog, and he was kind of associated with Sunset for years, and that very classic sound or whatever. And when I thought to myself, if Chad's like just going there, that's bold. I like that, And I thought to myself, do I want to hold on to the past? Because as we know, this technology is constantly changing, and nobody mixes on old Universal consoles anymore. They might have them, but they're not mixing on them, and stuff like that. But I thought, well, if I'm gonna move into the future, I'm gonna just rethink what my setup is for the next, say, 7 years. I was thinking, well, this has served me well for about 10 years. What could I do for the next, 7 to 10 years? And so this matrix seemed like the perfect solution because I have lots of analog, compressors and EQs and reverbs and stuff, and there's no EQ on this or compressors on this desk.
Right.
It's just channels with inserts on all of them, and they have this digital patch bay basically that I can have basically have all this stuff routed into the digital patch bay. This is kind of all my mixing gear.
Sure.
And I can very easily insert it on any one of these 16 channels. And I thought this would be perfect. This is like all I need.
Are you finding you're still going out analog
less
a lot?
and less? It's
less and less?
I basically right now, if I'm not totally in the box, it's just stereo bus coloration. My favorite stuff really I keep kind of coming back to always is this EAR 825 EQ. Do you know Tim DeParavicini?
I don't.
Yeah. The EAR stuff there's like two guys who I think are like the best gear makers right now, and it's Tim with EAR and Steve Furlot.
Steve.
It used to be Inward Connections. Now it's Tree Audio. But those two guys make the best sounding gear and the best quality, like as far as well built. I mean, I've had that Steve Furlot Inward Connections console for we'll probably look at it in a bit, but
yeah,
I've had that for like 15 years. I've never had an issue.
That's amazing.
Not a bad pot, not a bad tube, not a bad switch. It's just
wonderful
workhorse, and it's on every day. Same with these.
Great.
So anyway, get back to your reasoning for getting rid of the big console. I tell you, just long story short, I don't miss it at all. It's great. I'm so happy I did it.
But you had a sort of gentle transition because you were going 24, 16, 8, 4, 2.
Right. And
so,
you know what? I'll tell you, there was one light bulb moment really when I was asked to do a recall of a song that I had mixed back around when I had the big console, right? And it was about 5 years maybe after maybe a couple of years after the fact. And I was like, well, I think I may or may not be able to recall that because I don't have that console anymore. Let me listen to it and go back and look. And I just listened to the mix, and it was for I won't say who it was for, but it was for a producer who's very analog, known for analog sound, right? Mm-hmm. And I listened to it, and I was like, oh man, this thing sounds so good and warm and beautiful and 3D and all the things we say about,
yeah, great width.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, did I make a mistake by getting rid of that console, by not using the console, because I still had the console at the time. No, sorry, I didn't have the console anymore. I then go and find the recall notes and put up the multi-track, and I realize this was mixed completely in the box. And I was like, all right, this is, I'm sold. I know I made the right decision. So, that our minds trick us into so many. We have all these relationships and romance. I've still got a Studer, A800 back there that I don't really care to use it much anymore. But there's always some young kid who wants to come in and who's never actually worked on a tape machine who wants to,
I have an A80. Yeah. Hasn't been turned on in a while.
Yeah, exactly. But
it's wonderful to have it.
It is. It's great, and every once in a while it gets used, and sometimes I feel like, okay, this just made my job easier doing this, because it's like if there's particularly I find with loud rock bands, going to tape just takes the edge off right off the beginning, and it makes everything else after that easier. Because I always feel like when you're going to tape, it takes away, so much the transients and the high end, and you're kind of battling with what it's changed. And then when you put it up through the console, you're trying to bring out, you're trying to compress more to get some more attack and EQ more to get some more high end back, and you're trying to bring out what was there. Whereas with digital, it's like it's got it all, and I'm actually trying to tamp it down. I'm trying to get rid of transients and soften the high end, and so with particularly loud rock bands, if it gets tamped down right off the beginning, right at the top, it makes everything easier after that. So those are the times when I feel like, okay, I could bring out the tape machine for this. But even with that, I've got things that I do in the digital world that, you know, do the same thing.
Yeah, I've done some direct comparisons, but not really in tape. I feel like that's a lot of work, you know, to fire up a tape machine to compare it with a plug-in situation. I've never had the time to do that.
I did once with Stephen Slate's tape emulator, right? And he has one of his things. He actually emulates an A80 2-track, which is actually Howie's one, right? That he emulated, Howie Weinberg.
Yeah, Howie's in the same house.
Yeah, right, exactly. And one time we were doing a vocal, trying to remember. We just wanted to spin something in, and we were like, well, let's record it to tape. We wanted to. I can't even remember why, but I said, all right, just interesting. While we're recording that, I want to also just put up the Slate plug-in and compare it back to back, you know, with the same kind of settings and stuff. You couldn't tell the difference. I mean, the producer, the artist were like, then we just ended up using the tape one anyway because we had it there, and it's just, well, okay, let's just use the tape one anyway. But the emulation sounded fantastic. So, you know, I've done a couple of comparisons like that, and I've never felt.
Dave Casady would have me do that. We would track everything on tape, transfer. This is before any technology off the Reaper head, but we would transfer back into Pro Tools, then edit in Pro Tools. He would do the guitar overdubs, etc., in Pro Tools, but he always insisted after recording vocals, we'd have to dump it back onto tape.
Really? Yeah.
Once it was comped.
Keep the vocals on tape also. Yeah.
So I can definitely.
Yeah. Usually what I do is it's going to tape, and then I playlist it, and it's synced up with time code and everything, and have basically a tape playlist and a untape straight to Pro Tools one. Because sometimes you might find that, you know, it saved me a couple of times where, you know, an acoustic guitar track, when, you know, it was like you played a lot softer as we're going down. It's like, oh, it's really noisy now, and especially in that break there, we've got to, you know, so you just cut to the Pro Tools version there for a bit, or, you know, or for the whole track or whatever. But
it is interesting though. It's making me think of so many questions. I feel I did something recently with a live mix.
Yeah.
Where it was a band live and they were using a 47 on a vocal. Mm-hmm. So in the room, obviously the vocal mic became...
The sound,
became
that's picking up everything.
Picking up everything, but there was a moment where the singer just completely missed. Like it was a combination of the wrong note, the wrong lyric, everything, you know, so it had to be fixed. And we fixed it with a handheld 57 because we had to.
Yeah.
There was no choice in the circumstance we were in. And with the right compression, EQ, a little bit of bleeding some of the band back in, I guarantee nobody can tell which line was changed.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I'll tell you, there's a record, it's not out yet, but it was one of these where it was a vintage vibe, and we wanted to, we recorded basically all the basics to tape and right back into Pro Tools, just like I was talking about. And then we'd do vocals, but a lot of the vocals came off the floor, so the vocals were actually to tape also. But then there were one or two songs where we came back later and the tape machine wasn't working, or there was too many channels that weren't working. I said, forget it, we're just going straight in. And by the time they're all mixed, I'll dare anybody when this album comes out to say, okay, that was the 2-inch songs, and that was straight to Pro Tools songs. It's like, you can't tell.
Yeah, I completely believe you.
Yeah,
I've done records where, again, the same thing. We've had to because of time and money and all the other things that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
you know, mix and match, and like you said, you forget. You pull it back up a couple of years later, and you think that you mixed it on your SSL.
Right. Yeah,
but you find out you mixed it in the box.
Yeah.
I remember one of the very first transition records I did, which was purely in Pro Tools, because I'd only ever made records on tape. The mastering engineer said to me, "Oh, I love the way that you make tape sound," and I'm like,
"Yeah."
He was trying to be complimentary, and I'm like, you know, and I'm like, "Well, that's really nice, but this was on Pro Tools," and that was back in the days of 888s, and everybody used to hate on 888s and say how, you know, and this was a great mastering engineer. Mm-hmm. So, what can you say, you know?
Yeah. Well, proof is in the pudding, and you know what? I mean, honestly...
It's very English of you, the proof is in the pudding. Yes.
Is that an English phrase? Maybe it is.
I grew up listening to it. I'm sure Americans say it as well.
but you know, at the end of the day, all the little, I mean, you know, we start to get into these kind of, for general audience, microscopic differences, right? You know, and it's part of our job to know, you know, when something can be better, right? But only at as long as we're not impeding and putting up any resistance to the creative flow and the spirit of what you're trying to capture, you know, in the room and music, you know. So, you know, I remember back in the, you know, in the 80s and that, we would, you know, we would spend so much time on a sound that it was like, you know, the band was just waiting for, you know, when's the snare sound going to be right? When can we try, you know, and doing everything one at a time. And, you know, so us engineers kind of are responsible for a lot of the things that we ultimately are, you know, turned off by in modern recording, because we kind of looked at ourselves as a little too important, you know, rather than you know, the people on the other side of the glass that we're all there for, you know. So I really do try and just but also keep it all in check, you know. I
mean, a lot of those times you're making records in your 20s. So, to be quite frank, probably didn't have all the knowledge, so we're still learning.
Right.
Now we're in a position, you know, where I'm sure if you want, somebody says to you, oh, I love that acoustic guitar sound that you got on this record from like 25 years ago. Right. You're like, sure, it's this, and within 5 minutes you're tracking guitar. Right. Exactly. That's the great thing about acquired knowledge.
I mean, I've gotten great acoustic guitar tracks with a 57. You know, it's just, it's...
The only compliment I've ever got from Mark Endert when he mixed one of my records, you know, and he's a great mixer. He mixed one of my records years ago. He said, I love your acoustic guitar sound. And I'd had to do it in my house back in the days of a Digi 001. You know, like, remember those? Sure. So I'd done it in my house on that, and all I had was a 57 going into the Digi 001 mic pre.
Wow, yeah.
And that was the only thing he complimented.
You can get.
Yeah, the only thing he complimented on my whole recording was the acoustic guitar sound.
See, there you go.
I love Mark. Don't get me wrong.
It was probably a great song and a great, you know, great guitar part. So that's probably.
And it probably just gave it such a different sound that it stood out.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So you're right. A 57 can do the job in many situations. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you have got.
Right.
When did you get this Matrix then?
God, when was it? It's about 5 years ago, I guess, something like that. About 2012, I think.
All right, so what have we got going on here? I'm going to do something untoward and jump straight to this and miss out some other stuff.
We're not starting at the top. Well, that's
not starting at the top because
these are great, but this is.
I want to know with this because I used to have an AM. I think it was called a 617.
Yeah, this is the AM. There's different versions of the AM6. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know, because you're
English,
not British.
That's okay.
But you know, BBC would commission all kinds of companies to make gear.
Audix, Neve, Calrec.
Yeah. And so so you have like Calrec.
Mine was the Calrec.
Okay, that's what this is.
Oh, it is?
Right. Now this is the AM6/26. I don't know what some of the other versions are. I can't remember.
Mine was a 17. It looks the same though.
Yeah, that's what you'll find is they're basically, you know, the same circuits with different, you know, meters or different switches or, you know, but these are the same probably controls that most of them have. But the thing that's unique about this is that it has a delay circuit in it so that
look
it can
ahead,
look ahead, right, because it was supposed to be a severe limiter to where, you know, nothing's getting past this. So
it's a broadcast compressor.
Right, exactly.
So that it wouldn't overload you.
Right. So if, you know, once you've got the delay circuit in there, then the attack is, you know, immediate. So I got this in London. I was working at SARM West.
Oh, wow.
And I just started looking at some gear pages or something like that, and I saw this. And I was like, ooh, what is that? And I had no idea really about the history of it. I just thought, like most of the gear I buy is like, that looks cool. What, you know, what's the story on that? And he said, oh, it's a BBC Calrec, you know. I was like, I'll take it, right? And I love it. And you can't use it for power because of the delay circuit. You can't use it for parallel compression because it gets all phasey. But I mean, you could if you wanted.
Bring it back.
Yeah, but I don't. So that's, you know, and that later became kind of this, you know, it's kind of in between the 2254s and you know.
I've got to say, these are already quite expensive, but I've got to say this is probably the best sounding compressor I've ever used.
Wow,
I had one AM6. You know what I loved using on? I used to use it on the Jeff Emmerich trick, which Dave Jordan showed me years ago, where I'd put, on the Taxman, I know it's an 18-inch cab, miking an 18-inch cab, but I don't have 18-inch cabs, so I used to use a 15, miking a 15, and I'd use it on this because the bottom end would come and go so drastically on that bass tone. So this, because it's a look ahead, like you say, you could put it on limit, and it pretty much would just give you this solid blob of the whole time.
Yep.
And you pull up under on your bass tone, massive. So this, and guitars.
Yeah, guitars, drums, occasionally I would put it on a mix.
I can believe it.
Yeah, to give it this really kind of radio-ready sound, but not too often.
They used to be like $400 or $500 each.
I have no idea what I paid for it. I bought it probably 15 years ago, and
they're not that anymore. They're going to get even more expensive. No, these I think is a phenomenal. I've never actually seen them.
The meter's
with
going
the meter
that
like
way.
this.
I know exactly. Usually they're racked the other way, where the meter's turned around and they're up and down, right?
And mine was black, or at least a very, very dark grey, and it had a Calrec C logo on it as well.
Right. Yeah, because there's no logo on there. You don't know who it's by. Yeah, but
it's very exciting. Maybe we should edit that part out so they don't go up in value even more. So these are fun. These are fun little toys.
Sorry.
The electric stuff.
Our friend Ross is trying to call.
Which one?
Ross Hogarth.
Oh, Hogarth.
Yeah.
I've got it.
I know what he wants.
What does he want?
I've got a secret weapon that he's dying to. We'll talk about it later.
Off camera?
Sure, maybe on camera.
Well, what is it then? This is interesting. This is one of those.
Up there he is again. Hold on. He's actually FaceTime. Ross!
Hey, Dave.
Hey, man. Look at who I'm here with. You know Warren.
What are you guys doing there?
Well,
we're filming.
We're making a movie.
We're filming. Okay, and you're being filmed. You're going to be part of the episode.
Oh, man.
I love how you have the screen in your eyes. You look like, it's just hyper cool.
Well, Dave, I'm in a bad way, man. Like, you're the man. I need that hit spray.
I see.
The hit spray.
All right, you know what? Look, oh my God, here's another.
Howie's here.
Somebody else is coming. Howie,
Howie.
what's up? All right, I know why you guys are calling me. Howie just walked in. What's up? Come on in. It's a good time because we're being interrupted by Ross here. Are you here for the same thing?
How are you, mate?
Ross, you guys know each other? Ross, you know Howie?
I do now.
Ross.
I know Ross. Him and we did things we can't tell.
Oh, we can't talk about on camera?
We've made hits in the middle of the night. But
Oh, yeah.
now we need the hit spray, dude.
All right, well, you know what? It's time to tell these guys because they don't know what we're talking about. But
Really?
this is my thing that is, I find it's working.
Wait a second. I mean, if they tell everybody,
Well, it's probably it's still a prototype, so it's not
but
not
you got
ready.
the good, that's I have the
But
the
how-
generic version.
but it's
Doesn't work as well.
But you guys, so this is what we call Dave Way's hit spray.
You just time this perfectly with Ross and Howie walking in at the same
You know
time.
what? It's just a coincidence, really. But
It's not a coincidence.
well, no. But this is not. It's no coincidence that when you spray this stuff on your project, particularly when musicians are kind of not really getting that take, the magic take, you put a little. I'm telling you, the difference. You hear a difference, right? And you're just using it in mastering. You just.
These are
It's all about feel.
secrets.
I'm feeling it, bro.
This is
I'm a little surprised that you want to let this out. Like,
You know what? I wasn't going to do anything, but you just happened to call, and then Howie showed up, and then Warren's here for
oh my gosh.
I can also touch
Well,
the board
you know,
if you like as
It
well.
was Warren's birthday like a week in.
I know.
If it wasn't ready, this is still the prototype. But I've only given it to close friends to try out, and I'm glad to hear that
You were
guys
both
are
there, but I
digging
don't
it.
think you were both there at the same time.
I mean,
I think-
I already used mine up. It's like
See, that's it. This is my last can, right? And
Is it on Amazon?
see, now you're virtual here. Howie can actually walk away with this bottle, with this can. This, you're
You look right, I just kind of give you one of these and run out the door. But
you're gonna have.
Hey,
But
Dave, I gotta ask. Can I ask a real secret question here?
What?
Because you live up on the top of the hill, overlooking Eddie's prop.
Yes,
Have
yep.
Have you thought about, like, in the middle of the night sneaking down and spraying some around, like, 5150? It might help.
I had it. Eddie doesn't need much help. But you know what? But I
I like
find
to
is
steal his Ferrari.
look, you can't.
Worth like 400
You're not
grand.
guaranteed a hit with this, but you're guaranteed to sound like a hit, right? That's there's a difference. You can't predict a hit, but if you can sound like a hit, you're 80%.
Well, there's
there.
kind of a
Things are
strategic S here.
What's that?
There's the ways. Yeah.
What? No, it's hit spray. What are you saying? No, that's a money. That's a
Hi,
money
Ross.
sign.
How you doing, brother?
Hey, Howie.
Haven't seen you in a while.
I know. Well, we need
This will, you know what? This is going to be a hit episode. Watch
Hit
this.
episode, yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
hang
gonna
out
be
one
your
of these
best
days,
episode
Come on,
ever.
I missed you, brother.
So this compressor we're talking about here, it's called a Rockruepel, and it's a German-made tube compressor. I wouldn't touch that if I were you. But it's very, very, tweaked and calibrated. But actually, this is how he turned me on to this compressor. And you don't see them a lot over here. I'm not sure why. Nobody really knows about it.
Mercedes-Benz of tubes.
It sounds
German-made.
fucking great. Excuse me, I'm not allowed to curse that, but
What is it,
this
PG-13? It's gonna be
basically these two pieces are on my mix bus a lot.
Right.
This I talked about this already. This Tim DeParavicini EAR EQ, which is honestly
Beautiful.
that to me is the best sounding EQ I've ever heard.
I've never used one of these. I'd love to hear it.
Fantastic. You
Is
could, this. You know where I heard this was at Dave Gilmour's studio at Astoria.
Nice.
He does everything for them. They had a bunch of these, a bunch of the 660
a 1-inch
compressor.
tape machine, too.
He has custom
What's that, yeah.
electronics in there. He has
Right.
a tube section in their console. He has the custom electronics for their tape machines,
Beautiful.
everything, DIs, everything. And I first tried this. I just one of the things I usually do to check out an EQ is just crank it up, whatever find
Sure.
a frequency and crank it, and you cannot make this thing sound bad. You can turn up any band all the way up, and it's going to sound sweet. It's amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really great, and it's pretty broad
I
strokes.
mean, I know EAR stuff, but I've never seen this.
it's this I'll use for more surgical kind of stuff.
The GML, yeah.
Yeah, but this is basically for me most of the time especially on a mix bus, it's just I want it a little brighter. Or I want to knock out a little mid range,
Sure.
or add a little mid, whatever. Just kind of nothing too surgical.
Little low mids and some boost on the top.
Yeah, exactly. And I
you
just love the color
Cutting a
of
little
this. It's so-
240 here.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, coming out probably. Yeah, just a little out at 240
Yeah.
here, and a little bump at
100
100.
and some 10 and
So a
16.
little less at 4K.
Yeah.
Okay, we had something that was maybe a little harsh,
Right.
and a little
Great.
top end all the way up. Yeah. So,
Beautiful.
but I love that thing, and those are kind of on my mix bus a lot.
Are you using the Neves
I
much?
use those sometimes for vocals or drums, acoustic guitars a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about the Tannoys.
Yeah. Well, I've had these for like 20
Those are-
years,
those-
probably
by the way, those
more.
are classic,
More. Yeah, those
okay?
are 25. I
Yeah.
think I've had these.
No,
for.
I've
They
used
came
them. I
out in
love
their, I think, the late 70s, right?
These ones came out in the 80s. I
remember
think.
the 80s,
yeah,
yeah.
but they're the
They have the
concentric.
concentric
Yeah,
one?
exactly. So which is the Tannoy thing.
Yeah.
And was it Tannoy? You say Tannoy.
No, we say Tannoy.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
We see Tannoy, and we also call them concentrics as well.
But yeah,
We
but
hear
the,
they're
but the
called-
imaging on
I just
these
call
are
them
just
honky.
fantastic. Great
sounding
imaging on them. Really, that's what I
Yeah.
love about them. And then the ATCs, which
Yep.
we've talked about already, I love those. Those are dynamic and
You've recently
natural.
moved to those?
Yeah, well, about 2 years now. Yeah, but I just kept hearing. Actually, Dave Gilmour's studio had those. Was the first time
Yep.
I heard them. That was a long time ago. But I mixed the Ringo record on them. I thought they sounded great.
Fantastic.
And then little by little, a couple of other clients I work with. Alan Meyerson had them at his place for a while. I think he's
Wonderful.
still using them. I'm not sure. But
NS-10s?
NS-10s. These are custom NS-10s. These are the first series, right?
Yeah.
With the old tweeter. But if you look on the back, there's a custom crossover that my friend Dave McNair. Do you know Dave McNair?
I know who he is, but I don't know.
Dave McNair is a fantastic engineer, mastering engineer.
Oh, he built those?
Great guy. He designed the crossover.
But they don't sound like NS-10s,
years
do
ago
they?
when I was an assistant at the Hit Factory. right? So this is like, we're talking almost 30 years ago, sorry. And Dave had...
You were 9.
I was very young. And Dave had designed them, and then I got a pair when I first came out here, because I remember I showed them to Bruce Swedien, and when we were doing Michael Jackson's record, and Bruce was so excited, he was like, "This is the best thing I've heard in 30 years. These are great." So he
couldn't sound worse.
We used them on the Michael Jackson record, but I've had these for like almost 30 years now, and I still, I don't play them loud, so I don't blow the woofers, especially now.
Right. And your ears.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But because what the crossover does is it takes out some of that mid-range honk and stuff, so they're more normal sounding. They still sound like NS-10s, but you don't get into that thing where you have to make them so loud in order to hear what the bass is doing, and that you blow the woofer. You know what I mean?
Also, those things, if you don't put a badass amp on them, they're going to sound like shit.
Right.
You have to put like the really big, powerful amps on them.
Yeah, I keep the Bryson 4B on them. Yeah,
the Bryson on it.
Yeah. But and then over here I've got some hi-fi speakers that belong to a friend of mine that hoping he never takes back, but they're called Sonus Faber, and they're like hi-fi speakers, but they sound fantastic, and I use those kind of, I like having speakers on the side so that I'm not listening, just in the middle of the speakers all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to see how it fills the room without concentrating on what's coming out of this side and what's coming out of that side.
Yeah,
so
I agree. It makes sense.
That goes away when you're not sitting in front of the speakers.
All right, so I've got to ask you about this then.
Okay, yes. We haven't even looked in this live room yet. Yeah.
You said you got this about 6 months ago, so tell us about this.
That's the brains to the Calrec Soundfield microphone, which is out there, which is a multi-channel, they call ambisonic, I think is the word that they use.
How many diaphragms does it have in it?
You know what? I think it's 3. But I use it basically just as a stereo mic, right? Which is, I use it just as a overhead microphone on drums a lot, or room mic, or piano. It sounds fantastic on acoustic guitar. But the idea behind the electronics is that it time adjusts the capsules to where they're pinpointed in phase. You know what I'm saying? So the imaging on it is hyper real, really. It's like close to binaural, I guess.
Are we thinking mid-70s? And the reason why I say that...
Yeah, I think they're late 70s, early 80s. And, they were British, a UK BBC kind of classical recordings a lot. It's been used.
The reason why I say, because it looks very... I have a Cadet console, which is quad.
Right.
And it's the same nomenclature. Left back, left front, right back.
Right,
so quad. I wonder if they used this in the mid-late 70s to do quad recordings.
You know what? It's probably, I don't know, but I wouldn't doubt if it's kind of an outgrowth of the quad scene, because it is really 4 channels. So that's why I didn't want to say 5.1, because it was, but what's nice is that, so you can I just use it as a stereo, just combined left-right outputs. But if you want, they have discrete, I'll show you the cable. There's like 4 cables and another one power going over the XLR. So it's multi-channels, and if you record them separately, you can then reprocess them through the brains here and change the elevation and azimuth, and you can play around with the stereo width after you've recorded it, which is
fantastic.
Yeah, so I think that's if I was doing like a classical recording where it all depends on this in a way, maybe I would split it out into separate outputs, but like I said, I basically just use it as a great sounding stereo mic. It's got, because the phase relationships is so precise, things sound very clear and there's a lot of clarity without any harshness. It's very soft sounding, so it sounds fantastic on cymbals. That's kind of what first drew me to it. I was mixing something and I heard the overheads. I was like, wow, these cymbals sound really good. What is this? And I found out it was a Calrec mic, and immediately went on eBay, and they're not cheap, but they're
they're going to get more expensive.
Well, they're worth it. Honestly, they're fantastic, and I use that every.
My friend Julian Butcher was a jute. He was a BBC engineer for years, and he would do all the outside broadcast stuff as well as working in Maida Vale and everything. So that's how we got the Calrec stuff and the Cadak stuff and the Audic stuff, because of exactly what you said. It was all BBC stuff.
Yeah.
And he had one of these and raved about it. Like, non-stop.
Isn't it nice when there's a government company that demands quality, and so the manufacturers, it doesn't work that way anymore.
No, he now is an independent contractor. I mean, for him, he's making more money because he's getting paid on a case-by-case basis than a salary. But it's sad because you're right. It used to be all the best TV engineers, audio and visual guys were trained by the BBC.
That was the bar, and the bar was high, and everybody, all the manufacturers were trying to, make the best thing they could. So, but
that's how we end up with Trident consoles and EMI, and because the engineers would demand it.
Neve,
Yep. It's fantastic. I see you have some 160s.
160s, some 480. Well, I've got the 480, which I use occasionally. My main reverb that I use a lot is there's an EMT plate. There's a 140 back here.
Beautiful.
We can open that up if you want, but it's outside in the back in an enclosure. But
I see over here, I'm in the way, but you've got
a couple more reverbs. These are more holdovers from the SSL days here when I had.
Are you ever printing out anymore?
Well, like I said, the EMT I use every day. There's nothing like that. But I do use a lot of in-the-box reverbs now. There's some really good ones.
Any favorites?
I like the Valhalla one I use a lot, which is a cheap one too.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? One of my favorite reverbs that I have in the box is where I've taken two mono reverbs.
Yep.
And on one side is a deverb.
Yep.
Right? Set at a certain length and EQ curve. And then on the right side is revibe. And so you've got these two very different sounding, but they're kind of similar, but because they just have a very different sound, I find it
helps the vocals sit a little forward.
Yeah, it's just more discreet sounding. You feel like you can hear the left and right channels in a different way than when it's the same thing pretty much coming out of both sides.
And you keep them hard panned?
Yeah, hard panned, and that's one of my favorite. And anybody can do that. You could pick any two different reverbs and put one on the left, one on the right, and kind of make them around the same length.
I've always liked the deverb plate.
I do. I love deverb.
I always thought that plate sounded just like a real plate.
People send me a session and they put deverb on it because they figure, everybody has that, so it's kind of a universal reverb.
Yeah.
And so often it's on there, and I was like, no, we're going to keep that. It sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I
hey, look, all the great stuff. Like we talk about, Jeff Beck playing guitars, or Jimmy Page playing Silvertones, or what, the things that were maybe considered student models back when they were first made, end up becoming these coveted, Les Paul Juniors, or acrylite snare drums and things like that. It's like just because something is targeted and supposed to be cheap or more affordable, doesn't always mean not good.
No, I agree, and I think these days we're always looking for something that's a little different.
Yeah, well, that's why, like I said, with the 480, for the longest time when I was mixing in town at Larrabee or Record Plant or wherever, I was on a 480 boycott for like 10 years, where I was just like, I'm tired of 480s on everything. It's on every record. They're great, but I want to use, and I started using space stations and Cooper time cubes or whatever, something that nobody else was using, just because it would, I was just like, I'm tired of hearing the same thing every day, so, and I still try and switch it up. It's funny, like every once in a while I'll do a recall of something I did like 3-4 years ago, and you open up and you're like, oh, that's when I was using this on the drum bus, or I was using this reverb or this delay, like, why did I stop using that? Is it, that was great, but then you're on to something else, some new application.
The analogy I use too often, so sorry if everybody's heard me say this, is pianos. Because you remember when the first really amazing piano samples came out, you're like, wow, this is a Bechstein in a Vienna symphony, blah, 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 hall, and it was amazing. But now, like 15, 20 years later, it's so boring, like, oh, here's an incredibly well-recorded piano.
Right.
So every one of us
has no personality.
Has no personality. We'll have access to a Steinway, Bechstein.
And maybe that's the cool thing about the student models of things, is that, they have a little funkiness that we like that harmony guitar we were talking about. That's like got a lot of personality.
Let's go to the live room, since we're doing that. All right, so we're in the live room. Let's talk some beautiful guitars. Seeing as I'm a guitar player, I'm going to get selfish.
Well, it's funny. These are the guitars that are less used. The guitars that are more used are kind of on the stands back there. But yep, that's one of the first. These are kind of some of these are like the first guitars I had.
Well, the 360 is beautiful.
Yeah, and that's apparently a rare color. I think it was only available for a couple of years in the 80s. It's like a blue. It's like this.
Really
I forget what kind of blue they call it.
It's like a really dark navy blue. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you were telling me off camera about this because I said, "Oh, this is beautiful. It looks Japanese. Looks like an SG 2000." And then you said,
"Right, yeah." There was a point in the 80s, or maybe it was late 70s. Sorry, about 78, I think, where Epiphone got the guy who was the head of Yamaha guitars in the kind of glory days there to design a guitar for them. Because Epiphone had kind of fallen on, the luster had kind of worn off a little bit, and they were like, we need a new exciting guitar to come out with, and so they had this. I forget the Japanese designer who came up with it, but I just saw it on eBay or something, and I thought that's a cool looking guitar. I'm going to buy that, And I did a little research on it, and everybody said this is a great playing guitar, one of my favorites, and it's got coil splitting on the coil tapping on the that switch there. Yeah. So I love it. I use it fairly often.
It's beautiful, glued neck. I picked it up earlier. It plays beautifully. And then what is that?
What's this?
Yeah.
I got at the Rose Bowl flea market.
Rose Bowl flea
I think
market.
I paid like $25 or $50 for it or something, and it's fantastic. I mean, I just bought it just because of the way it looks. But if you want, now it goes through. It's kind of got a trigger. You can play. I love this neck, but it's got a little funky buzz. It's out of tune.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to play like Willie Nelson when I pick it up. But it's.
It's probably like.
There you go. It's got a rattle in it that's kind of, there you go.
Yeah, it's that kind of.
As soon as you're born.
Yeah, as soon as you're born.
Yep. There.
Can't do Stairway on.
No, stop!
No! Plays great.
Isn't that neck cool? And it's got a kind of concave thing to it that makes it really fun. We need to start a band.
We're gonna do that Beatles band, remember?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll put this up.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I love it. And you're right. It looks completely like I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I think it was. From what the guy told me, is made in Mexico. Some just a luthier who doesn't make a lot lot of guitars.
I don't know what that is. What
That's
is that?
I don't know what that is. That belongs
like
to my friend,
guitar,
Val McCallum. We were talking about Val. Val brought that over for a session one day, and we played it on a track. And he said, "If you want, you could just keep this here." And I said, "Great." So we pull it. That's the only electric 12-string that I have. So every once in a while we'll pull it out.
It's beautiful.
It's some Italian. What's it called? Oh, Continental. Is that what it is?
Then it's probably a Vox. It's probably like but then it's probably built by, people can correct me, probably Bartoloni or something. I have a Vox bolt-on neck jazz guitar called I don't remember. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful, but it's bolt-on neck and it's big archtop 175, looking kind of thing, and it's built in Italy, but with the Vox.
Right. Well, that was the other thing. Vox would. I have a Vox bass that I really like, but it's not out right now. But yeah. And
then you've got that beautiful harmony there, the Rocket.
Yep.
Which is probably many people's first guitars.
Yeah, I picked. That was one of my first guitars. That I bought out here. I was buying a drum kit, and for some reason I forget what drum store it was, but they had a guitar there, and I saw that, and I said, I like this too. But that's SG.
Yeah.
My brother gave me that as a birthday present a long time ago.
Beautiful. I love Guilds.
Yep. Yeah, well, that one, that was a gift from John Doe from X, that's a great rock and roll guitar. I love that guitar.
I love that off-kilter.
Yeah,
SG.
the pickups are fantastic, and it's got a nice chunky neck, and it's rock.
One of my first real guitars was a Starfire 2, a 62 Starfire 2, which was a Guild, obviously, and And one of the things I bonded with Joe Perry over was, I was like, oh, I love this guitar. And he goes, that was my first guitar.
Really?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, Guild was like as well made as a Gibson.
Right.
But they weren't as coveted. So, you know, you may have gone from your bolt-on neck
deal.
GP and your next step up was a Guild.
Right.
And especially the acoustics.
Yeah. Oh,
They're phenomenal.
Yep.
Those 70s acoustics are
Yep.
unbelievable.
I'm on the search for one actually right now.
Yeah, there's some really, really good ones. I think they're starting. I'm going to paraphrase the story, but they are, I believe, a lot of the original Epiphone luthiers and other that left around about the time that Gibson bought them. That isn't exactly the story, but it's the Guild of Crafts. Basically, they're really, really well built by wonderful people. So I don't know the full story. Please leave questions and comments below. So
Now
what's that?
you know what that's called? A Bajo Sexto, and it's basically
Oh, it's like a baritone?
It's a baritone. Well, it's actually an octave lower. It's tuned. You know, see there you go. But it's 12 string. It's it's just tuned normal. Usually, traditionally, it's the B and E strings are strung to C and F. But
Wow.
I've just got it as B and E, and just pick it up if you like. I mean, it's got a great sound. It's hard to play. The neck is super wide.
Oh, yeah.
And it's Isn't that awesome? And it's great for melodies, like little guitar lines, melody things. Yep. Isn't that cool?
Write a whole album on that.
Yeah, and
It's like the acoustic version of Jay Mazik's.
what's
Dinosaur
that?
Jr. or something like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, right. Yeah, everything
Yeah.
just low and raw. Yeah,
and-
exactly. Yep.
And then a new Danelectro.
Yeah,
Those are beautiful.
you can't.
Quick look at the C. Is this a C5?
This is, I forget what it's called, but
Or has this got the MIDI?
yeah, it's got it doesn't record MIDI, but I can play back MIDI. So if I get a MIDI file and we want to do a real piano with it, we can do that. Done that a few times. It's great.
Love your
Yeah,
podcast.
it records well. I've had some really great pianists compliment it, so I feel good. This is cool.
Well.
Yeah, Wurlitzer Spinet. This is the funky piano. I love it. See, as soon as you started playing, it sounded like Carole King. Yeah,
Well, Louise is coming over.
yeah,
later.
she is. Yeah, we used that on her new album. Yeah,
That's beautiful.
isn't that great?
Nice controlled low end, so you don't have to do anything to it. Just put a mic on
Yep.
it.
I like this mic on that. Actually, I used that.
So this
a good
is the
deal.
Calrec.
Oh yes, that's why we came out here. Yes,
That's okay.
This is the Calrec Soundfield, and you can see it's got like 5 cables.
Right.
One is a power, and then 4 for the other separate, channels. And
Oh, wow. We're going to get some skills of that.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a Rickenbacker there.
Yep.
So this is kind of your Paul McCartney
This
area.
is bass. This is kind of bass area. The bass amp goes in there.
Kind of because you've got the two
this
favorites.
is
the Hofner and
this is the one I told you I picked up for the Ringo record on Denmark Street. And there was a store there that had, it was all kind of Beatles gear. So it was Rickenbackers and Vox amps and
Which one? Was it a
Hofner.
little tiny
I can't
store?
remember what it was called. It was really tiny, and they had like probably 100 Hofner basses in there.
Wow.
And I maybe not 100, but 70 or something like
I know
that.
what you mean,
And
yeah.
I went through, I just played a bunch, and I found the one. And this is a little bit later one. It's a 67. It's got what they call the razor blade pickups. But I love that bass, and I got to play it on a Ringo record. So I use that a lot. And I do, here you go. Yep. Gotta love it. I mean, to me, that I feel like a kid when I have that. It's just makes you just want to bounce, play, swing.
So cool.
Yep. And then here's a true here's a true baritone, a Jerry Jones, that's tuned to 4th.
Oh, wow.
Was it 4th down or 4th up? I can't
I
remember.
heard he
Yeah.
stopped making guitars and retired.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I'm not sure what year this one is, but
His
I love the sound of a
For those
baritone.
that don't know, his stuff is like boutique quality, handmade to the same level. You know, so it looks and it has
Right.
all the lipstick pickups of the Danelectros, but it's just. I have the sitar guitar that he made. It's just.
You know what he makes that a friend of mine has is this little, what he calls a shorty, which is a 12-string
Yeah.
short scale electric. So it's kind of got this mandolin-ish 12-string thing. It's amazing sounding. Yeah, right? Fun.
It's like it plays so beautifully. I mean, that's the thing. The Danelectros were wonderful, and they sounded amazing, but they weren't
Yeah,
players' guitars.
exactly. These are more players.
Yeah,
exactly.
he made players' guitars,
And this is the Jack Casady bass,
which
actually,
is very hip bass of the last few years.
It is fantastic. I actually
Yeah.
got this one from Jack himself because I did a session and I said, "Hey, can I
That's
have one?"
Jefferson, that's Jefferson Airplane for anyone that's wondering.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yamaha 5-string, but this is my my Fender Jazz. That's a 72.
Beautiful looking.
Yeah, that one's my favorite. I think that
There's a Coles hanging out there.
a Cole's just hanging out,
Yeah.
being ready for the task. Sometimes that's an overhead. Lately,
Quick question: What do you
using-
like on your piano? What do
I
you
usually use these M269s. Those are almost,
So a pair of
always on the piano.
269s?
Yeah, and
Are you-
sometimes with a room mic, and sometimes I'll put a ribbon mic on there instead. Yeah, 271.
So one here,
One,
one here?
yeah, exactly. One about here.
Yeah.
One down there, low, close,
Right.
and occasionally I'll do it just with one mic or a ribbon mic. Sometimes if I'm looking for something a little more old school sounding.
Does this have a Leslie or you might?
Well, yeah, the Leslie's in the corner. This is a C3, so it's the same as a B3, but it's just the wood is different and no pedals, but it does have reverb, which is the number one thing to have because then
Yeah.
you get the reverb going through the Leslie, and that's such a big part of the sound.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's fantastic.
yeah. So this gets used a good deal, and the
love
Leslie's in the closet over there.
And what are you doing mic-wise on that? What's your-
Usually I'll sometimes, very often, just one mic, depending on the production and how much space and how important it is. But what I do a lot, rather than the traditional, two on, pair on top and one low.
Yeah.
It's not always that you want to have the stereo, feel like you're right in front of the Leslie kind of thing. Sometimes I want it to sound like the guy's on stage and he's over there. And
Yeah.
so in those cases, I'll have one close mic and then another one out here with the door open. I'll usually put a 47 right about here. And so then I'm able to use the room mic pan to the opposite side of wherever I'm placing the close
Great.
mic. And it just is creating this space and ambience without it taking away from the articulation of what he's playing, and that's my favorite kind of way to mic a B3
That's great.
most of the time.
Do you find with pianos you're sort of thinking the same way? Quite often?
Sometimes it depends on how important the instrument is in the arrangement. Sometimes it's a piano song, so you want a big, nice.
I think that's
stereo
something-
piano sound.
Something, I'm glad you're touching on this because I think that's another reason why we look at some of the older records and the newer records. It's because we can do everything so much better, we have so many more inputs. Everything's recorded in stereo, everything's wide.
But you
and
don't
beautiful.
always need all the, not everything should, in my opinion, sound big and huge. You got to kind of pick what are the important characters of this song. Absolutely. And who's playing a co-role, a background role,
Yep.
and so when you can pinpoint those, there's nothing I hate more than getting a track to mix or doing a record where everything's in stereo. You've got stereo piano, stereo acoustic guitar, stereo organ, background
I'm not
vocals.
giving any of my stuff tracks to mix.
Well, because then what happens is everything is just coming out. You can't pinpoint. Nothing pops out. Everything's just coming out of both all together. And for me, especially, the 60s panning, Beatles records and things from the 70s when they were limited to one track for piano or, one track for drums. And, so you have things you just, found their spot with the pan pot, and maybe add a little bit of ambience against it, So I find that things just pop out of the speakers more if I look at it like that. And I try to judge it by how important is this guy? You know what I mean? How big should it be? So if it's important, I'll make it big in stereo and, maybe put a, delay kind of, but, if there's a delay of 30 milliseconds or something between the two channels, or that kind of a sound. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah.
As opposed to just one thing small in the back.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because I think that is a big differentiator between some of the modern records and the older records is limitations on tracks.
Right.
Like you were pointing out. There was only, even on 24 tracks.
Yeah.
When we first started, 24
is
tracks
great.
was
That's,
like, wow,
yeah.
we got 24
I think 24 is a
tracks.
great limit. If you can kind of get it all on 24 tracks, because that's plenty, But and I try to do kind of keep arrangements to about that, but just using all the stuff that you get with Pro Tools, like playlist, and not having to erase the solo that you did before because, we only have one track left for a solo. So, so just keep trying solos and
Bounce
complement.
the bass guitar and the tambourine on the same track.
Or just kind of keep things, do bounces if you want to, and treat them. I'd like to treat them as like, even drums as like one thing, you know what I mean, and do processing to them as a whole, as opposed to all individual tracks, because there's something that happens. Sure. That's why, the drum kit would just all get brightened up because it was on one track, and they just turn up the treble, and that's the, so the hi-hat and the cymbals are all loud, but,
I've told this story before, so I apologize, but I made a record with this band Augustana maybe 10 years ago, and we went to
Did you do that at the Pass?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my studio.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't know if we talked about that. Yeah, right.
I remember I came in once and I was mixing in X or T. One was
T was the tracking room and X was the mix room.
So I was mixing and I came in and I was trying to figure out the melody on the vocal because what I was mixing was, let's just say I had to do something. So I walk in to use the piano because the live room wasn't being used.
Right.
And I walk in and Brent was in there talking to somebody, and I'm like, hey, excuse me. He's like, no, come over.
Oh, Brent Spiner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
one of the
funny.
few days
like,
he was there, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty funny. I was like, yeah. So I came in there to figure out the harmony. But no, I love that studio. I love those 87
Yeah, that was a great sounding room, too.
All our roughs from that room
sounded
were
great.
pretty hard to beat on the mix. And I mixed with Jim Scott when I went over to his place. And we ended up just redoing the roughs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, great. That's a fantastic room. I'm glad it's still a studio, even if it's privately. It's owned by Yoshiki now.
Did he keep the 8078s?
Nope. He put in SSLs. Yep. But I can tell you where those 8078s are now. Actually, one of them, I think, is on sale at Vintage King. It's up for sale at Vintage King. Yeah, the one from the mix room, I think. Yeah, and then a guy in Nashville has the other one.
The tracking 8078 was special.
Yes. I'm trying to remember which one went where.
It was special.
I have to think about it for a second.
And it was so well maintained.
Yeah, we had great staff there.
What was the name of the guy with the really long hair?
Well, there was Mark DiMartini, yep. Sadly no longer with us, but he was...
oh, really?
Yeah, but he was fantastic.
He was amazing.
Yep, and Marco Fox, who's still around in town and doing stuff. He fixes a lot of stuff for me.
I was sad to hear about Mark, because I hadn't been there in so many years.
And Steve Anderson was another guy who maintained that console for a long time.
Yeah, Steve did a lot of work for me. Yeah. He was sadly no longer with us,
I know. So
I was quite close to Steve. We used to talk all the time.
Yeah, it's,
He put all the wiring in my studio.
Oh, did
he?
Yeah.
But that guy Mark I loved.
Yeah.
And we can probably edit this out if it gets boring, but did you remember that comic strip in the 70s called The Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers?
No.
It was like these hippies that were all really skinny with big
beer
bellies.
Right, that's him, exactly. With a cigarette, because he was a constant chain smoker.
But he knew his...
Oh, man.
I could ask him a question.
Yeah, oh, man.
And he was so droll and very well
and he'll tell you the history of that op amp or whatever. Yeah.
It's so sad he's not around anymore.
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I made quite a few records in there. Because I made 2 records with Casady in there.
Oh, okay,
right.
There. Yeah, he was one of the regulars, sure.
Yeah, we did...
Wolf Mother?
We did... No, before that, Thrills. We did the Thrills, Summit Sunset. Oh, Ha Ha He.
Oh, okay.
Remember Ha Ha He? We did that in there.
Yeah.
You owned it then. And then I came in with Augustana for like 6 weeks.
I remember that record, yeah.
There was a whole bunch of stuff I did there.
Yeah.
Howie Dyer came in and cut a single there over a week. And I loved that place.
Yeah, I missed the tracking room. Well, it was a great room.
And Anne used to run it.
Great.
And you did the Pumpkins record in there.
Yep,
with,
that was who did that? I'm trying
Thomas
to remember.
Baker.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Roy Thomas Baker was
right.
He was also friends with Jack as well.
Uh-huh.
So I met Roy during Aerosmith. He came down and exactly what you'd want him to look like. Long greyish hair.
Oh, yeah.
Bright red velvet jacket on. I got on the from the 70s.
I got on the phone with Roy as they were finishing tracking. They were going to go mix it at Village, and I tried to convince Roy that he should try mixing it in the mix room at the Pass, and which was in a 40 channel 8078. And he was like, well, I would need, and he gave me a list of everything. Basically, he would need another 40 channels of 1073s in order to put on the monitor section. And, it just got out of control because he uses every control, every channel, every, pan pod and every EQ engaged. So I understand why you went over to the
assistant was Zeph, wasn't it?
Zeph, yes. Fantastic. Who works, I think, still with TV on the Radio guy, Dave Satek. Yeah, he's been with him because
Zeph's one of my favorite assistants ever.
He was a fantastic assistant.
He was amazing.
And he's a fantastic engineer.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask a couple of things about your drum miking here. First of all, what are you using this on, and what is it?
This one, it's nothing on right now, but this is a fantastic new microphone that I discovered by a company called Ear Trumpet Labs. I think they're in like Vermont or New Hampshire or something. Fantastic. They make, this is what you would call maybe a bluegrass mic where everybody kind of gathers around, right? So
it has that feel, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's super high output, hypercardioid. So it's kind of meant for the stage where it's not going to feed, but you can get a good amount of gain without feeding back and, yeah.
So what are you using it on?
I have yet to find something that it doesn't sound good on. I've used it acoustic guitar a lot. I've used it on vocals. It sounds great. I've used it on the piano, drums, as an overhead. What else? I haven't used it on electric guitar yet, but I have no doubt it would sound fantastic.
I've got to ask you about your miking technique here. So that's a 47,
That's a 47, a vintage Telefunken 47.
It's got a 47 as the overhead. Yep. You've got, what do you got going on
D19,
here?
I'm a big fan of the D19.
Jeff Emmerich drum mic. He used to use it on his overheads, didn't he?
He used it on everything. They used basically all D19s for a long time, and the Coles occasionally and stuff.
It's basically AKG's
but they're basically
the 57.
They're the 57 of the 60s in England, particularly in Europe,
But I saw two things, obviously. I see a little Shure clip-on mic.
A Shure SM98, I think it's called, which is a clip-on. I used one of those once a long time ago, just because we didn't have another mic stand. I said, well, give me that one. I can just clip it onto the thing. And it sounded great. And I don't think I've used another, every once in a while, I won't use a high tom mic, and I'll just have, one mic kind of in front of the kit that ends up getting a lot of tom from there. So, but that's been my close mic on toms.
121?
Yeah, so this is a little different usage. Because it's a ribbon mic and it's bidirectional. What I've found is I don't like hi-hat mics most of the time.
Very English of you.
Well, it's kind of useless, I think, for the most part. Occasionally, if it's a kind of a groove that's very hi-hat centric, I'll need something for the articulation. But for the most part, I'd rather just move my overhead mic to kind of capture that stuff. But in this case, what's great about this is I can control the amount of hi-hat leakage by how I move this into the null point. So if I want, I can move this more, this way where it's going to get less hi-hat because it's in the side null here. Or if I do use it, against where it's in the sweet spot, it's very phase coherent. It's not that phasey, leakage that just makes the hi-hat sound horrible, particularly when it's just bashing, open hi-hat. Yep. So it's got a nice, you'll get nice hi-hat leakage.
Great.
And as long as you get the balance and get the sound, the right hi-hats, that's what I find is the case more often than not is, do you have the right cymbals that are complementing the song and the right drummer? Yeah. And, it's more about getting the right sound at the drums than getting, another mic on the hi-hat.
Or tree audio on this?
Some of it is, the snare is going through the inward connections tube mic pre. The kick drum is going through a Electrodyne, one of the Peter Montesi Electrodyne ones. Yeah, that's a D30 in there. Yeah. Yes, you know the D30, the best kick drum mic ever. All right, the prices on that just went up, but they're already expensive. They're already expensive. And they're hard to find. You won't find them. Yeah,
Sadly,
kids, you won't find them.
That's where and in England they were very popular as well.
Yeah, they're great.
I make a joke about how English of you because when I first started tracking, I had my own studio that real engineers, when I wasn't even close to a real engineer, would come in. I used to mic everything, put a mic on everything, and I need this cymbal mic, this mic. Nobody had ever shown me.
Right.
And I remember Andy, a guy we're talking about, who was working with Dave Gilmour, came in, and he put a 57 on, pair of 87s as overheads, and a D12 on the kick, and that was it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the Glyn Johns thing is, tried and true. If you can get away with 2 microphones. Well, you could get a great drum sound with just that mic, and either a kick drum mic, or depending on what the groove is, place that other mic just right.
A lot of people in England like the colors.
Yeah, a little out. Yeah, exactly. But most of it's when you think of it as a drum kit as opposed to a kick, a snare, a hat, a tom. You know what I mean? Because that's some styles of music demand that. You're not going to do a
super heavy
thrash,
guitars
exactly, metal thing where everything's got to be close mic. But that's for me, I much prefer sound of a drummer playing drums than of all the individual drums with some guy playing them.
Well, it's fantastic. What are you in your vocal booth over here? What do you got set up?
That's not really a vocal booth. Well, I'll show you what I do with the vocals most of the time. This is the bass area usually. Here's my favorite DI, the Tonecraft DI. Yep. And then that goes into, I've got a small Ampeg amp that sounds great.
And
a FET 47 on that, as close as I can, and I love that sound. And that's big enough for an upright player if he's going to play upright.
Great.
And then the guitars are usually in this room over here if the Leslie's not being used. But there's I got a bunch of amps, and then there's another little amp closet over there.
So thanks very much, and we're going to wrap it up because we've got work to do. You've got to go and make a record. I've got to get back to one.
We could talk all day, but.
So we're going to do a part 2. And the reason why we're going to do a part 2 is because looking over here, there is at least half an hour's worth of gear just to talk about over here.
We could talk about the Motown EQs for a half an hour.
Yeah. And we skimmed through a lot of stuff. We didn't even get to talk about the guitars over here. We're talking about the guitar you got from Val. We're talking about that beautiful... Anyway, the point is we'll come back and do part 2.
Anytime. You're close by. So
yes.
We'll run over one morning.
So thanks ever so much for having us here. I really appreciate it.
All right. Cool, man.
Please, why don't you do this? Leave some comments and questions, because if there's stuff here we've talked about and you want me to ask Dave about it, because frankly, everything we talked about on and off camera is a story behind so much stuff. We could come back and ask some questions about other gear as well.
If we're doing a part 2, we could have, we could answer questions. A good idea.
So Q&A. You want me to ask specific questions of Dave? We'll come back in a week or 2 and ask them.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All
so have a marvelous time
See
recording and mixing. Thanks a lot.